Hi, and welcome to Test Talk. I'm Ed Mobley. I'm here with my colleagues, Justin Hankey and Justin Sebastian. And today we're going to talk about the evolving role of testing in the organization. And by organization, we're not just talking about IT, but we're talking about business, right? For example, we have a video on user acceptance testing, where the traditional buyer tends to be the business, and then for other areas of testing, the IT organization tends to be the buyer. So again, testing cuts through the organization. So with that, what are some of the trends that we're seeing as far as the context of the testing function in the organization?
I'll start. I'd say that one of the common themes that I'm starting to see over and over is just the ask to do more in less time, right? So that really everybody, but specific to testing, we're being asked to, how do we get our testing done in a shorter time frame? How do we get our regression done in a shorter time frame? Where do we use automation to help with that? And a lot of the focus right now in that regard has been spent on, what are we testing? Are we testing the right things? Let's make sure we're not testing too much. Let's be very targeted. As we've talked about in one of our other videos, I think, around reporting, as we start to split out some of the pieces, different work streams, businesses, we start to be able to ask questions about, well, why are we testing so many test cases here and so little here? I thought it would have been different. It's really opened up the eyes of technology and business to look at that and answer those questions. And a lot of time it's, I don't know why we have that many there, and why we don't have as many test cases in another place. And so we start to have those conversations about, well, let's take a look at what we're testing, how we're testing. Let's get that as concise and crisp as possible.
But to facilitate that conversation, sort of the why. That to me says that testing is really evolving from kind of a rote, mainly manual, kind of a lower cost, vendor type selection, to really becoming more of a strategic pillar in an IT organization. I mean, actually, a CIO of one of our clients actually shared that sentiment, with me. And even though we've been talking about the future of testing and the role of testing for a long time, it was just very interesting to hear it from a client. And what he had shared with me is that, testing really needs to be evolve from being primarily a commodity pursuit, manual pursuit, lowest cost vendor, to something that's really a strategic pillar in the organization, something that's inspired, something that constantly evolves, something that looks to maximize scope and minimize the effort. And that when I hear you talk about that, I mean that's really what I hear that you're alluding to is really the testing, again, becoming more of that strategic function.
I think that as testing, I think of course has always been in this role of making sure things work, right? That's kind of the general idea. But if you really think about like the different phases of testing and the responsibility testing has to make sure that the business is getting what they need, that's that's an important thing, and it's not just something you have to transform a little bit from like something that you just have to do and have to fit in the schedule somewhere, to being a critical part of your software delivery and your business. Like so much, regardless of industry, so much of your business relies on technology and making sure that it works correctly. It's an important thing to think strategically about, not just something you have to do.
Well, I mean, you've heard folks that have predicted the demise of the dedicated professional tester for some time. But we seem to be seeing the opposite of that. It just seems that the role has evolved. So if you look at somebody, who is a focused, dedicated, testing professional, how is that role evolving? Because, some folks have posited that, hey, if you do all your testing in Sprint, you really adopt, agile practices, there's really no need to have a dedicated testing
Like
function.
everybody's a tester.
Everybody's a tester, right? But the reality is that, well, sure, I guess everybody can be a tester, but maybe you have folks doing testing as one of several jobs, and therefore their velocity's constrained, and maybe their day job is something else that you'd rather have them doing 100% of the time versus just 50% of the time, because they're testing. And so let's talk about some of those prognostications around the demise of the tester and what we're actually seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the spirit behind a lot of automation and even machine learning and AI and the use cases for that at the moment aren't necessarily about replacing humans. It's about taking away the kind of mundane and repetitive things so that humans can do the more thoughtful, meaningful things. So it's not about taking away their job. It's about taking the things away from their job to let humans focus on what humans should do. So it's just kind of enabling them to do those things better.
Well, and produce more output, and again, without getting into the philosophical discussion, how will automation, will we have jobs in the future? Well, won't go there, but I mean, I can tell you what I'm seeing is that, there's an increasing need for professionals in this space, and professionals who are inspired. There's definitely an increasing need for them, and they just produce more for each unit of work.
It's enabling humans.
Enabling
testers. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're more of an enabler rather than just churning, cranking the wheel or turning the proverbial crank. And I also see it too in some of our deployments. Yes, our initial remit may be specifically around testing, but because we're so adept at looking at things that are being done manually and then figuring out ways to automate them, what I find out my teams do is we go in there and it's we look at things that folks are doing manually. It could be in the business, it could be in IT, and just ask the question, why are we doing this manually? And you end up taking 20-hour manual tasks that besides the amount of time it takes, they're prone to clerical error and so forth, and then automating them and turning them into a 10-minute task with literally zero clerical errors.
Yeah.
I mean, that's truly enabling, and that I think is at least in my purview is representative of how our role continues to evolve.
Yeah, and I think that enables you to do the things that you were talking about earlier, right? If you don't have to spend time creating test data, now you can think about the things about, are we testing the right things? Should we be testing more or less? Like all the things you talked about earlier, right? So those are the types of things that are, needs a human to help with.
Yeah, it's almost like we're putting a level of QA on the QA itself, right? We're being, obviously timelines are getting tighter. I think less money's being spent on testing, and all these things add up to we're probably not doing the testing the right way we should be. And the role of the human or the tester in that is to figure out what are the automatable, the easy things that we can give to a machine to run. Where are the places that we really need to use our brains to process this, and from a quality perspective, make sure that the application does what it's supposed to do, right? Like we get in the rut of automating to automate, we get in the rut of let's just make sure all the requirements are tested, yes or no, did they pass? And it's easy to lose sight of does it do what it's supposed to do at the end of the day, right? And I think that's the human piece of it that we got to really focus on. I think that's the future of it, is like all these things are happening, where time's getting shorter, we're going to spend less money. That's going to keep happening. It's how do we make sure we're still validating this product's ready to go at the end of the testing cycles.
Yeah, and I also see testing evolving into being a more fulfilling pursuit, because traditionally, particularly when testing has been manual, folks see it as a stepping stone to get into something else. But now when I see, all the tools, techniques, and enablers that a tester has at their disposal, they almost become like a problem solver. So you can go into an organization, again, as I'd mentioned earlier, with a particular remit, and then you start asking questions, and you almost become like an efficiency consultant in many ways. And that's something that people today in their jobs want varied experiences. And so with each project, with each client, you go in there and you sometimes you know what to expect, but then there's also the unexpected. And it's just I see it, it's very enriching, for me as I lead teams to see, particular folks, that, are at various stages in their career coming into an organization and realizing that, hey, I've identified a challenge or a problem or some inefficiencies, and I can make a difference. I am empowered, and I have the tools at my disposal. And so, talking about trends, I think you may see more folks that instead of seeing, testing as a stepping stone to something else, may actually see it as the destination because of just the varied experiences they may have, variety, right? And the positive impact they can have.
Yeah, I think the times that I've seen testers kind of transformed into understanding the business and sometimes end up knowing the products and the business better than the BAs do sometimes, right? Just because we get in there and we understand it to such a great detail that sometimes we help the clients understand their own products better.
Oh, and connecting silos, right? I mean, traditional business consulting, right, is you connect the silos, but when you go in there as a under the remit of testing, and because you have to understand the business processes, I mean, you're connecting parts of the organization sometimes in a more efficiently than a traditional business consultant may do that. Well, good. Anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap this up? Besides the fact that, hey, testing's cool and folks should get into it. And
I think that's it.
All right, very good. Well, folks, and hey, for those of you who may be in your formative years of your education, definitely this is a career path to look into. Of course, as is the case with all our videos, we'll have a white paper. We'll have a link in the video description below. Again, really appreciate you spending time with us on Test Talk. Until next time.